Hi, welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I am Barry P. Cook, and it's time to review the latest episode of Discovery. That would be Season 3, Episode 6, Scavengers. After receiving some upgrades, the Discovery is told it must stay at Federation HQ in order to be ready to jump into action if an emergency arises on Argus. So Michael goes off in Book's ship to find a black box that may hold answers to the burn and to extricate Book from whatever situation he seems to have gotten himself in. She and Giorgio infiltrate an enemy junkyard, retrieve the black box, rescue Book, and free an enslaved workforce all at the same time. So that's what basically happens in the episode, but let me give you my notes. Once again, they depict Discovery using these repair bots. Now, at this point, it's possible the repair bots belong to, Starfleet in general, and they are not housed on the ship, having come with it from Discovery's original time period. But they don't tell you this. So you're left to assume that they're the original repair bots that were there when the ship was in its original time. And they should explain it if they're going to keep using them, because then we could maybe forget that they had them when they shouldn't have had them. Part of this upgrade was that the ship's nacelles were detached, because I guess this allows for greater mobility, perhaps in battle or whatever. I'm not quite sure why that is. Certainly, being able to move your ship's parts around and reconfigure your ship has come in handy for Book, because that happens not only in this episode, but in previous episodes where we've seen Book's ship in action. So I get that, but I don't understand how it works. It's not something we've seen in Star Trek before. So in universe, we don't know how it is that that's possible. And again, this is 3189. It's a period we haven't been to before. So, the fact that we've never seen it before doesn't mean anything, but it still would be nice to get an explanation of how it works so we would know. But anyway, they detach the nacelles, which I guess is a thing in 3189 that a couple of the other ships have as well, detached nacelles. They gave the crew new badges that act as tricorders, personal transporters, communicators, and one or two other things, I think. They included programmable matter in the controls, and they showed the crew having to get used to that. I still don't understand all the ins and outs of programmable matter, but that's okay. One weird thing that they show is that the Discovery registry number was changed. They had an A added to it. So it's now the NCC 1031A. And I'm trying to understand why that would be. Normally, you don't add a letter to a ship's registry number unless the ship with the original registry number without a letter at the end was destroyed or decommissioned or whatever, and you don't change from one letter to another unless the same circumstances have occurred. So why are they adding an A? The original Discovery is not listed anywhere in the Starfleet database as far as Admiral Vance can tell. So why would he order or requisition that the A be added to the registry number? It would be one thing if they were trying to make it seem as though this ship was not the original ship, for whatever reason that they might want to do that to further confuse people about the spore drive or what have you. But the original ship isn't in the database, so there wouldn't be a need to do that. So I don't understand why they added that. Maybe they'll explain it at some point, but it's almost like the people writing this show don't know what's come before and don't understand how what's come before works beyond a cursory understanding. And it's extremely annoying to think that. So the reason that Michael even knows that Book has a lead on this black box, or has possession of a black box, and that he might need extricating from the situation he's in, is because she receives a time-delayed hollow message from him that it seems like the cat sent, which is weird, but and because the ship was programmed in advance, his ship, to find Michael wherever she might be, at the Starfleet headquarters, the coordinates of which wouldn't be known to him unless she told him, but we don't know that she did that. It's very confusing. Anyway, his ship shows up there, and she goes to tell Saru what his message said. He has a black box. He can help us figure out what happened to the burn. And Saru basically tells her, we've got to stay put. The Admiral wants us here in case there's an emergency on Argus, which could happen at any time, and he'd want us to be able to jump there immediately. And, we can't go chasing down this thing or rescuing your friend. And Michael says, we should really do this because we can't rebuild the Federation or stabilize the Federation until we know why the burn happened. And I'm thinking, well, why? Obviously, you'd need to find a way to restore mass propulsion, or not mass propulsion, but warp speed propulsion to Starfleet in an alternative way. You'd have to get off the dilithium, obviously, if all dilithium's been destroyed, and if you're worried that any future use of any dilithium you might unearth could be risky because whoever did what was done before might do it again and blow up a bunch of ships. But you don't need to know why the burn happened or who did it in order to move on. To use quantum singularity drives, for example, or slipstream or whatever else, you don't necessarily need to know what happened to, the dilithium in order to do that. So why does she, you wouldn't necessarily want to not investigate what happened, right? But you don't need to do that in order to reconstitute Starfleet and the Federation. You can do that without those answers, but at the same time investigate what happened so that you'll know, so that, in case there's any way that whoever or whatever caused it could do it again to, whatever propulsion you end up using. But don't stall the reconstitution of the Federation and Starfleet because you don't know what happened. That's just dumb. So for her to say that was dumb. But of course, she doesn't listen to him when he tells her we can't go do this. She says, well, we think the situation might develop in the next 12 hours. I can go and be back before that. And he says, no, you're my number one. I need you here. The Admiral doesn't want anybody going anywhere. You can't go. I can't sanction this mission. So she pretends to agree, but then the first thing she does is run to Giorgio and say, I'm going to go on an unauthorized mission, an unsanctioned mission, and, recruits Giorgio to help her. And it's like, really? Again, you're going to do this? Again? What is literally wrong with you? Starfleet officers in the past have disobeyed orders. Starfleet officers have in the past gone on rogue or unsanctioned missions. Kirk did it, Spock did it, Picard's done it. It's a thing, right? But they don't do it every other freaking day. This is Michael's modus operandi, 24/7, 365. It's absurd. Especially when they keep letting her get away with it, over and over again. Now, recently, they've sort of given her some lip service about, you have to stop doing that. But they haven't enforced any real consequences. So it's just grating to see her at it again. But yeah, she leaves with Giorgio in Book's ship on this unsanctioned rogue mission. And nobody notices that, shuttle bay force field's been lowered and a ship is left. Nobody notices this. They don't notice that she's leaving. It's right away anyway, because no alarms went off when that happened, which I found ridiculous. While they're getting underway, Giorgio has a conversation with Michael about, how she suspects that she and Michael have an attraction to one another or whatever. And she calls She calls Book the Blob Whisperer, which I thought was funny, I have to admit. But again, it's this glaring use of 21st century vernacular by characters from the 23rd century. And it's extremely annoying that they keep doing this. Then they get to the place where Book's message was apparently sent from, or the place that it referenced, and they're trying to finesse their way down to the planet, posing as buyers for whatever wares this junkyard or whatever has to sell. And the Orion guy is reluctant to let them beam down, and Giorgio basically verbally kicks his ass and runs roughshod over him and gets him to agree to what she wants. And I thought it was very cool. She basically just bulldozes people, and I love it because I hate, people that are, so stuck in their bureaucratic ways that they like to just throw up red tape constantly. Kind of like a Nurse Ratched character, that constantly does that in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So I thought it was great to see her like ripping this guy a new one and basically getting her way. It was very cool. But this of course is a minor highlight in an episode and a series that's just full of the opposite. But I did want to give credit where credit was due for that particular moment. When they get down to the planet, though, the head scratchers continue because either she or Michael tells the guy that's showing them around that they're looking specifically for, parts of ships or components of, machinery from the 24th century. And it's the 31st century, so I'm thinking, or the 30th century. So I'm thinking, why would they keep junk around that's from 500 years ago or 400 years ago? Like, what are you doing? I when you write this stuff, I don't think that's, who does that? That would be like going to a junkyard now and trying to get a part for a 1920, car, or a car from 1910. You could find those parts probably in the world if you went online, but to go to your local junkyard and say, show me where the car parts from 1910 are, they're not going to have them. And that's only, 110 years ago. So I just found this to be ridiculous. Then there's a moment where Stamets, back on Discovery, Stamets is checking on how things are going in engineering, I guess, because there's still some retrofitting going on. And he encounters Adira, who is sort of working on stuff, to improve systems or whatever. And I realize she's like a talented engineer, quote unquote. They've set her up to be that, but like, she's not Starfleet. So why would they just let her work on stuff unsupervised? Like, not because she'd do anything nefarious, but like, just doesn't make sense to me. She would have a partner working on stuff with her that's Starfleet, that's authorized to, do stuff. I don't understand why they would just leave her alone. It was kind of silly. I mean, there are other people in the room, but like no one's specifically paying attention to what she's doing, and it's kind of silly. Speaking of silly, all throughout this episode, that character Linus, freaking Linus, keeps popping in and out of different rooms that he's not trying to be in with the personal transporter, because he's trying to go from wherever he is to a certain place in the ship, but he keeps beaming into the wrong place. And it's like, really? And of course, one of those is a turbo lift where Michael and Book at the end are hanging out with the lift stopped and having a conversation that, spoiler alert, ends in a kiss, but not before Linus beams in and temporarily interrupts that from happening. It's like, really? It does not happen in Star Trek. Not in that silly way, anyway. There is an interesting Andorian character in this episode. He's someone who works in the junkyard as an indentured servant against his will. And I guess a lot of the other inmates or whatever don't trust him because he's been put in a position of a bit of authority where he has to administer these, I guess, tracking devices or whatever on the workers. So they're kind of, think of him as a collaborator. So he's kind of sheepish in this episode because nobody likes him, but of course Book likes him. But you come to find out that he's actually a good dude who unfortunately has had his antenna cut off by the overlords for some reason. And he's grown a beard, which you don't really see on Andorians, so it was pretty cool. I thought it was a good character. He ends up being rescued by Discovery in the end, so we'll see if they do anything with him. He ends up wounded, so they're rehabbing him at the end of the episode. But there's a possibility we might see him again, and I'm actually looking forward to that because I think they could do something cool with this character. But Michael is back on the Discovery at this point. When all that's happening with the Andorian, they're rehabbing him in sick bay. And she just puts on her uniform like nothing's different and goes about her business. I mean, she has to go and see Saru and I guess the Admiral, but she's walking around like nothing's different. And of course, they give her a dressing down. I say of course, but that's only a recent development, right? That they even bother dressing her down when she does these things. But the Admiral, is really annoyed, and he's not at all used to her shenanigans. So, again, of course, he's annoyed. So he's giving her what for. He's giving Saru what for allowing it. And he says, the only reason you're not in the brig is because you saved people. And I thought that was good to hear because she needs to hear, look, do this crap again and you're going in the brig. You cannot keep doing this stuff. And then Saru tells her that he doesn't want her as first officer anymore. And she ends up taking her badge off before the episode ends. So we don't know what's going to happen. The preview for the next episode doesn't really show anything related to her, where you can kind of get an idea if she's going to stay in Starfleet or not. But it kind of looks like maybe she isn't. So that'll be interesting how they're going to focus on a character that's not even in Starfleet. The show is a mess. Anyway, let me backtrack a little bit because before we get to that, there's another scene with Adira, and she is talking to Gray, whom we know that she can see, like he's in the room. And she tells this to Stamets. I really hope it's something that they explain because it doesn't make sense for Star Trek. We don't see these things with relation to Trill anyway in Star Trek. So it's something they need to explain. Until then, I'm going to see it as stupid. That's just the way it is. The only other sort of thing I have to talk about with this episode is Giorgio, who continues to go through these little sort of seizures that she's been having, where she freezes up and can't move and doesn't act. And it almost gets Michael killed in this episode. And, I just don't understand why she's allowed to be on the ship at all, even regardless of this situation. But especially now, because Michael tries to convince her, we need to help you. You need to go to sickbay. We need to look into this. And she's dubious of that and doesn't want to do it. But, why is she allowed to roam around the halls at all? Why isn't she in the brig? She's a Terran. She's always messing with stuff. She's an agent of chaos, whether it's to the extreme or not, because so far she hasn't done anything extreme, but she's a chaos agent. She's a free agent who's not obligated to follow orders. Why is she even allowed to be on the ship? I mean, obviously it's because the character is a fun character. It gives the writers something to do. It gives the writers a tension point. It gives the writers a drama point, to write about, but it doesn't fit in with what Star Trek is. This is not something that would be allowed on Star Trek. So it's just annoying. I mean, again, I like the character, but she doesn't belong on a starship. And that's why this show, I think, has so many problems. It's like they can't decide what kind of show they want to be. They want to be a Star Trek show. The show is called Star Trek. They do Star Trek-y things, right? It has Star Trek elements, but then you do all this stuff that doesn't fit the Star Trek mold. And it's, I think, one thing to sort of take a property and try to push the envelope of what that property is and to innovate while you're, doing something with that property. But they're doing too much of it in too many different places, in too many different directions. And I think it makes the overall product unrecognizable almost as Star Trek. They're doing it with her. They're doing it with Adira and Gray. They've done it in other ways in the past. It's just a mess, and I really wish they would get their stuff together. I really do. The other thing I want to talk about real quickly is, why don't they have the new uniforms? Why haven't they given the Discovery crew the new uniforms? I don't particularly love them. They're okay. It's not like I'm dying to see the Discovery crew in them, but if they're going so far as to put an A on the ship and all of that, you'd think they would give them the new uniforms. So far, no. They give them the new badges, not the new uniforms. Why? This is another thing that sticks out. Uniforms are phased in, I guess, across a fleet. I guess that's how it happens even in real life navies, for example. So you wouldn't have all crews in the newest uniforms at the same time, but there's no reason they can't do it. They have replicators. Just do it. So I don't understand it. Next week's episode looks a little crazy. And like I said, we don't know if Michael's still even in Starfleet. So we're going to have to wait to see. But that's all I have to say for now. So until then, my friends, once again, I say peace and long life.